So I think we can just continue talking about Germany. Who would have thought that 10 years ago cars might be the past in Germany and cannabis the future? It's a very good choice for everyone to be here, because as we've just listened and heard, maybe it's one of the most interesting areas which we can discuss at the moment. And with us on stage, or we have more or less the who is who of German cannabis. We have Arnold Holle, managing partner from Carlsquare, an expert for M&A, growth, equity, and IPOs. We have Boris Moshkovits, CEO and founder of alephSana, who is basically in the industry before there was an industry. First speech beginning of 2016. We have Hänsel, CEO and founder of Sanity Group, Mr. Fundraising of cannabis, raising more than 60 million. That's correct, Finn? Roundabout 60 million, more than any other European cannabis company in venture capital. And we have Germany's cannabis company builder, Niklas, Kouparanis, CEO and founder of Bloomwell Group. So this is really like a high-level industry representatives we have with us. So great to be here. I would like to start this session with referencing to the title. We say California or caution. How good is the Californian model for us in Germany? Maybe Arnold, you can share your first thoughts about California.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that the German ambition is humongous. And I think if you ask Bleenert, what do you want to put in place, he'll poo-poo California. He'll say, I want to have something even better. My ambition is unbounding. And he says, on the one hand, it should be cheaper than the street price. The most important objective is to protect youth and consumer health. At the same time, everybody is looking forward to massive tax revenues. By the way, we want to build a huge industry. And look at California. I think Bleenert would say, well, I look at my list, and that hasn't happened in California. Not every one of those objectives has been fulfilled. So my ambition is greater. And if I had to fault the ambition, which I don't. I mean, it's a fantastic ambition. It may be a bit too large, and I think we might struggle to put that into place in a time frame that will make us all happy.
Niklas, what are the biggest problems in California?
Yeah, I think that, especially if we're talking about California, it's not a pretty good example for great legalization, right? I think that's still the illicit market, especially illegal grows, and also illegal dispensaries are a big issue in California because you cannot compete if you are a legal business with paying 40% of tax with paying no tax. Right? I think that what in California went wrong also is that California, first of all, decriminalized cannabis. That's something we don't want to do in Germany because you will strengthen the illicit market. And that's what happened in California. And I think we should also pay close attention to balancing cultivation and balancing actually dispensaries or point of sales. Because in California you have way more cultivators than actually having dispensaries, which results in decreasing prices with the high taxes and also a big illegal chunk of point of sales and of dispensaries. That's something we don't want to do in Germany. So not a very good example for us, I guess.
Yes, last numbers I've heard that 75% of sales are still done in not licensed shops. Market share is like most of it in California is not licensed shop. Finn, what can we do better, and how can we guarantee really to defeat the illicit market, which is the overall goal, even looking at California and learning from that kind of mistakes?
Yeah, I think if you see the theme of today's talk, caution or California, I think that describes the dilemma for the government pretty good. Because on the one hand, you don't want to be too cautioned and you don't want to be too restrictive, because then obviously you support the illicit market going forward. So for example, if taxes are high, if the availability is not everywhere, if the convenience factor is not there, you can't deliver to the house. If it's too restrictive, you will not be able to fight the illicit market. On the other hand, and that's a legitimate concern for the government to have, if you do too loose, you are at the risk that suddenly people who never thought about smoking cannabis are suddenly becoming consumers, and that's obviously what the government wants to avoid. And I think at the moment, no country in the world, neither Canada nor California, maybe some others like Oregon a bit better, but found the perfect compromise between those two ankles. And in my opinion, the best solution would be, similar to what Nick just said, with the illicit market in California, you have to enforce shutting down illicit stores, because if you don't do that, you will always have a problem, because once you tolerate the first store, just have a look at New York right now, more and more stores are popping up. And I think that could be a big problem, and that's the reason why I think the enforcement needs to be very restrictive, and also the decriminalization needs to be regulated in a way that is really thought through. However, on the other hand, I think you can't go crazy on the taxes. You need to ensure availability. You need to hand out more licenses than, for example, in some parts of Canada, like Montreal, for example. Because if you don't have product available or it's too expensive, you will not be able to fight the illicit market. And I think that's similar to what Ms. Lütke just said, will be the biggest challenge of that law, besides international law restrictions. But I think we have to think into that direction to make sure that we have a good legal market in Germany.
So sales infrastructure, regulation, enforcement, and pricing is key to defeat the illicit market. Regarding pricing, we compete with 10 euros on the illicit market. The legal market will pay taxes. Let's see how many and how complicated things will get. Boris, do you think that German cannabis businesses will be able to do good, profitable business with a 10 euros final price?
If you look at the market, not from, let's say, our perspective, but from the perspective of the consumer, then you realize what is most important is actually the quality of the product, the variety of the product, the accessibility of the product, and the consistency of the product. And eventually, people will be willing to pay for that more than 10 euros. Currently, the black market price is what it is, because people buy from the dealer they know, from the corner they know, and they go with the infrastructures they know. By inviting the best from those infrastructures, this is what we can learn from California. When we look at California, what has really, say, inspired growers, consumers throughout Europe and throughout the world is the sophistication that entered the market that hasn't been. If you think back 10, 20 years of the product we had in the streets, or a couple of years actually, in the streets of Germany or other European countries, it's not comparable to the quality and sophistication of product we have in California. So there is actually something we can learn. Take the last mile, take the consumer, take into the consideration there's actually talented growers out there who are illegal because that's their personal choice, because they can't be anywhere else. And so the 10 euros, yes, for a discounted price, there will be product. We see this in Israel, we see this in the States. There will be a discounted product. You can buy a 10 and it's going to be competable. I'm not sure what kind of profit they'll do. But in the end, I also believe, and this is what we all hope for, the craft growing, the single batches, the sophistication that we see in California to enter the German market and enter the European market.
So focus on quality instead of just competing via prices.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who has touched the product, and this is a lesson we've also learned from the medicinal market where we all stand, you have to deliver product that is actually to the benefit of the patient. As we heard before from the politicians, there's a couple of platforms in Germany that enable, I would say, product of lesser quality to enter the market. This is not the best choice for the patient, even though it's a cheaper choice.
In the prior section, we talked about the hearings, and who knows, maybe Mr. Blinert and colleagues are listening. So every one of you, if you have two things you want to address to the process of hearings, what would that be, Arnold? What would be your 2 concerns you would like to say which should be like considered in this kind of process of policy making?
Okay, so the first thing, I have a background in retail, and so the first thing I'd say is make the product that is legal easily available. Don't, alcohol is easily available. Yes, it's protected from use by young people, but nevertheless, there's no holding back on availability. And so I'm in favor of having a early licensed model and a license that's easy to obtain, and so that there is no restriction in sales through pharmacies alone. That would be the first thing, and I think that's a fairly easy ask. The other thing, I want to take up what Boris said. So the free distribution of alcohol was reintroduced in the US, after the laws were abandoned in the 30s. And lo and behold, the price gap between low price alcohol and high quality alcohol is very, very wide, as we can see. And I think we can trust the entrepreneurial spirit of the community that's assembled here to communicate to the consumer the benefits of their individual product and make the price adequate for everybody. So let's not get too hung up about the taxes, and at least keep those low, but allow for a creative industry to give the right product to the consumer and charge for that.
Which will be interesting how that will look like, because Mr. Bleenert so far always stated that advertisement and marketing most likely won't be allowed at all. He also wants to ban that for alcohol. So the gap of product information without any advertisement and marketing will be something we should closely watch in this.
I think we're gathered here, a lot of clever people. I'm sure we will all be able to communicate our product, as best as possible with the regulation in place.
Finn, what 2 concerns you have in mind you want directly to address?
So I think number 1 goes in the same direction of what Arnold said. It's convenience. So what do I mean with convenience? So for example, if I have a dealer who I can call, who's 10 minutes later at my door and delivers it to me, obviously that's a real different case from the next dispensary is 15 kilometers away from me. I have to find a parking place and I have to go there now, and then I have to see if they have the product available that I want. In a nutshell, that means make sure that the legal market can compete with the illicit market, because if we don't do that, this law has failed before it even started. So that's number 1. And that's number 2, in my opinion, and I know that I have a very specific view on that in the cannabis industry, but I always say don't put EU GMP as a standard for legal cannabis. Tobacco is not EU GMP, alcohol is not EU GMP, coffee is not EU GMP. Why would you regulate cannabis EU GMP? And in my opinion, that makes it much more complicated. You have to have quality standards, obviously, but it would be ridiculous if you think that, for example, Israel right now, the medical market doesn't have GMP standards, and the German market, if they would have EU GMP as a standard, that would be kind of weird in my opinion, and that's the reason why I think it would also help a lot of small businesses, a lot of small cultivators to actually strive in that market if you don't put EU GMP as a guideline.
Which also might directly be affected to the big question how to get these 400 tons of cannabis into the country, because as soon as GACP facilities can provide, it might be that the rule breakers will be able to fulfill the demand. Boris, anything you want to add to what has already been said?
Absolutely. It again goes to the, let's say, variety choice of product and the qualities. I believe, and it's going to be a challenge from the legal point of view, that we get product from around the world. At some point in German legislation, somebody said, we want to be the world export champions in cannabis. And I say, why? Germany is not the champion in pineapples or strawberries or anything else. Why do we want to be the champion? This is a certain hubris because we are like, let's say, the fourth country or something. So when Uruguay started, we're the world leaders. When Canada started, we're the world leaders. Germany is going live, we're the world leaders. Stop the world leadership, and get the product from around the world in the best qualities and what Finn said, at a quality that is reasonable for the product itself.
Nick, any thought?
I mean, Moritz, you know me for quite some time now. So I've been around the medical cannabis industry from the beginning. So I think we can also use the medical example to learn from it, right? And what was interesting about how the medical market in Germany evolved is that, first of all, you had a lot of demand and no supply, and now it's more about access, right? So I agree with all my colleagues that access is key, right? So I strongly recommend, and that's what I'm always talking about, is to allow e-commerce, right? That's very important, because otherwise, if you don't allow e-commerce, then you would have a concentration of dispensaries within the cities, and you will just shift the illicit market to the countryside, which is not something we want to have, right? Also, what is important, and what we also learn from the medical market is that, I mean, of course, we're cultivating some cannabis in Germany for the medical market, but it's not a lot of cannabis, right? 2.6 tons and 20 tons in total demand annually doesn't match up, right? So I think also for the recreational market, Germany relies heavily on imports, because we will be the biggest domestic cannabis market in the world, 84 million inhabitants, right? Bigger than California and Canada combined, the two flagship markets. And with 400 tons demand in the first year, we need imports in order to satisfy that need. And that is crucial to drain the illicit market and have a successful legalization, and maybe be also a role model for other EU countries to follow.
You just mentioned the medical market. At the end, business needs to build the German market. Politics will provide regulations. What kind of business will be the ones who build this market, Niklas? Niklas, yeah.
I think when it comes to using your medical cannabis positioning and also your medical cannabis know-how as a company, you need three things, right? First of all, it is important to have access to product, because without having access to product, you will not have a product in the market, and that is very bad for you in order to become a market leader in that recreational market. So you need access to supply, and you need access to high quality supply and for attractive pricing, right? Because otherwise, again, we cannot fulfill our mission to drain the illicit market. Secondly, what is important is you need data and you need know-how, right? You need to know also for educational purposes, because that will be very important for Mr. Bliner to, for example, train the sales personnel within the dispensaries, right? So what you need is, you need information from the medical field in order to know your customer, to know, for example, side effects of the products, right, in order to educate the consumer. And last but not least, very important also, you need distribution channels. That's something what, for example, didn't work in Canada. And I think we as an industry and we as companies in that field are responsible to provide these distribution channels, right? And that is something we need to do now, not only point of sales, like physical, but also online, right? These are the three main factors I think are crucial in order to generate a head start for the recreational market.
Boris, you wanted to add something?
Sure. Look, the digital aspect of things is something that will be added to the industry eventually. At first, we need to be sure that we have the right product in hand and that we have the right channels, as you said. We also need to understand that German legislation always has been responsive. It's not active, it's reactive. When I started in 2016, there was no law. In 2017, the first law came about for the medicinal, which Niklas was just referring to. And it was a law that was made because the first patient fought in court to grow his first plant. So this is how German politicians think. They react, they don't act. We need to inform them, we need to help them make the right decisions in a proactive manner. And we have been, as an industry and as a distributor in the medicinal space, bridge builders. We were the ones to decide what doctors would prescribe. This is, and usually you have a whole process of a pharmaceutical company making choices, making clinical studies, and choosing a product. In this case, we were the ones reaching out to the cultivators in the world, finding the best product, and pushing it, and marketing it, and educating the doctors and pharmacists. And again, in the recreational market, that is why I think some of the distributors are in the right position to do so. But also what I have to say in the medicinal market, what we see over the last couple of years. When I started, it was 15 licenses. I remember the first license. Now it's maybe 100. Most of them don't have a clue what they're doing. They will be worthless by the end of the year. And this is another important message to, let's say, investors, partners, strategic partners. You have to look behind the curtain and what is really happening in this industry. So that is my take and input for that.
Arnold, will independent European cannabis companies close the gap to the North American corporates? Thanks, or let's assume the market turns into reality. Will they close the gap?
I think that's a question that cannot be answered today. I think it depends on the work that's going to happen. I hope that the deliberations in Berlin are going to come up with a solution that is going to allow for German business to be at least as strong as their North American counterparts. We all know that the potential is huge for the German market, and the ambition is very, very great. I would suggest to the legislators and to the public to be patient. I don't think there is if this doesn't happen this year, I don't think it's a disaster. Let's take a step back and think about what we're trying to achieve here. 1 year here or there doesn't really make that much of a difference. We're all impatient. We all want to, IRR, obviously, return on capital, depends on the timeline. But nevertheless, the opportunity is so great that we should see that gets implemented, and then yes, absolutely. I think you look at so many industries, and Germany has leading players there.
Yes, over-optimism has been one of the key characteristics of European cannabis in the past. I mean, medical cannabis was also 2017. Hopes were big. Let's see, this time we're not talking about the medical market, but really the biggest market worldwide, so it's a different setting. Optimism might be better in place if policy will make it happen. Though we still have many, many question marks how the framework actually looks like. We don't know how many shops will be licensed, under what kind of circumstances, where supply will come from, how the salespeople needs to be educated, etc. Still, all these early movers are already ready to build the market. What can you actually do, Finn, to get prepared for the kickoff?
I'd say at the moment is the phase to stay flexible. Like really open up all the options and think that you have a scenario prepared for every option that might come. So for example, if only local cultivation would come, I don't think so, but then you have to be prepared for that. If only EU import will be possible, you have to be prepared for that. If only the legalized countries like Canada, Uruguay, and now Thailand, and then hopefully Germany, are actually ignoring UN Narcotics Drug Convention and they can trade, you have to be prepared for that. And I think that is something that is super challenging right now, to really think like, which direction am I going? But this flexibility, I think it's super important. On the other hand, the same Obviously, I think it will be a hybrid model. Pharmacies and dispensaries will be able to push products into the market. And again, here, the companies have to remain flexible. So they already have to think how they would handle a B2B market or maybe even running their own dispensaries. They need to be prepared for the case that e-commerce would be allowed. They need to be prepared for the case that maybe in the first step only pharmacies will distribute. So I think keeping that open-mindedness and flexibility and really prepare everything on the way without running into a dead end is, I think, the best that cannabis companies can do today.
Niklas, Boris, how do you prepare your companies and yourself for the kickoff of the market? Whoever wants to go first.
There's two things that are certain. There is the plant and there's the consumer. And this is the two things we focus on. So we always look at the markets that exist, what's happening there, what are the trends, the art of the long view, what is coming next. As we are hyping California, New York is on the rise, what will be the next market to look at. So what we do is we do product research, product development on one hand, and also education and I'd say market access for cultivators from throughout the world, because we believe there will be an international market for sophisticated, educated consumer, and this is the two ends of the market that we focus on.
Nick.
I mean, one thing I learned during the last 5 years of medical cannabis is don't rely on politicians too much, right? So always be prepared for all circumstances, and that's also what we are doing at Bloomwell Group. I mean, we have built a one-stop solution for patients prescribing medical cannabis and also distributing it to the patient. So, I mean, we were thinking very recreational from the beginning on, right? And had a very lifestyleish approach when it comes to actually being a cannabis patient, right? And that is something what we could use also for the upcoming recreational market, that when it happens, we will be there and we will have supply, we will have knowledge, and we will have distribution channels ready.
Finn, we have already mentioned that one question is how most likely currently the regulation will look like. We don't know so much. And on the other hand, what the industry wishes. What is the biggest gap in between wish and most likely assumption at the current state?
Well, in my opinion, the industry, us as companies, are very much in line with, in our opinion, what it takes to fight the illicit market, right? So it means the companies want high availability, the companies don't want restrictions, the company wants a relatively liberal law. And I think within the government, there are today slightly differences. The SPD, the Social Democrats, more conservative, the Greens more liberal, and the FDP liberal in general. However, the biggest gaps are the restriction of distribution. I think there is a tendency, especially in the Social Democrats, to keep it as much as possible to the pharmacies and do only exceptions outside pharmacies. I think from the industry perspective, there's a strong interest to have it as available as possible, and I think that's a gap. The second thing, I think, is the ideas about the taxes. I think when the Liberals brought their proposed cannabis legalization into the parliament, I think 2 years ago, they suggested something like 5 to 6 euros taxes per gram, which I think is ridiculous, so this will not work out. I think the government has learned by now, and they are more to 2 to 3 euros at the moment. That would be better, but I think that's a big gap. And then, again, I can't stress enough what Nick said, e-commerce, like really having availability not only in a physical storefront, but having it delivered to your house. That is something that I think will fight the black market, that is in the interest of the industries. You can make it safe by doing ID checks at the door, but I think the politics at the moment is very far away from the mindset to allow that. And I think those are the biggest kind of gaps as of now.
Okay, you also mentioned e-commerce solution, which might be, from business perspective, together with franchise solutions, the really interesting cases. Niklas, how can you, in e-commerce business, how can you guarantee education, youth protection of minors, and also like send the package to the receiver that the right person who's above 18, let's assume that will be 18 plus people who are allowed to buy, receives this package?
Yeah, very, very important point, Moritz. I think it's not that difficult, actually. Right? I think we see that also in the medical field right now. So that's what we're actually doing, right? So I mean, first of all, if you go to a doctor right now, in Germany back in the days, we estimate that only 2% of doctors actually prescribe medical cannabis, right? I think it's still the case. So what we thought also as Bloomwell Group is it is important to have access for medical cannabis treatment. And you get a onboarding call on site. After that, it's all based online telemedicine, right? And we're educating also the patient right now, and that's what we can also do for consumers in the future, right? That's not an issue. We have the technology, we have the knowledge, and that's what we can do. And I think also when it comes to the delivery model, in order to have the protection of minors in place, right now also when cannabis gets delivered, medical cannabis gets delivered to your doorstep, there's an ID check, right? So that it reaches the right person, right? So I think the infrastructure already is in place. It's not the question how, it's the question why not, right?
If you're looking at North America, we see that margins are dropping, employees are leaving companies. What are the interesting business models across the whole value chain for investors, but also for business who might think about entering this market, Arnold?
So I think the question which business model will ultimately succeed or which business models will be successful, it'll be plural, obviously. It depends very much on the regulation, and we should look to other industries to understand which business models work there, maybe rather than to other regulatory environments, and take inspiration from the creativity of people over time as they develop business models that adapt to regulation. So I think we'll see something really, really clever in the way that apps will be used, for example, and in linking e-commerce, licensed distributors. There'll be some sort of direct-to-consumer model that will get the product quickly to the consumer. That will be an area of creativity where we already see very, very successful business models in other industries. There'll be interesting marketing ideas, in the light of regulation that might make it difficult. You remember the camel outfits and the Marlboro apparel. I think we are well advised not to speculate on the creativity of the business community, but I'm happy to sit at my desk and wait for that call and say, wow, I hadn't thought of that. Kudos to you.
You didn't mention cultivation and import.
I think that is the import, frankly, amongst all the different topics. When I first started to sort of tackle think about that legislation, that is the one issue where I have no answer. It must be really, really tough for a legal scholar, and I don't envy the discussions between the Department of Justice and the Department of the Economy around how to avoid, break, disregard, ignore a set of laws that we've signed up to. I'm glad I'm not part of that decision-making body.
I mean, it's super tough to tell where import will finally come from, but just like trying to make some speculations, what do you think? How we will cover this demand of 400 tons? Who wants to start? One of you. Boris? Boris, is that right?
I'll start, and I think there's this, what you asked before, the discrepancy about the reality and what we wish for. The reality is the tons are in the market already. They get there somehow. Some people grow them, some people import them. This is the 400 tons, or probably more, that we will have to either replace or integrate. And this is the lessons that the politicians really have to learn. If we integrate, what are the smart ways to integrate them? If we ignore them, they will not disappear. These are people who are making money. You will not push them off the street. So I think we have to find intelligent ways of integrating. I was at a conference earlier this month, the Cannabis Normal, with stakeholders, activists, growers, and in the end they said, well, what about social clubs? What about coffee shops? What about home grow? And all of these topics are still in the minds of those, and also in the minds of our politicians. And this comes to the second discrepancy. There's three parties in this coalition. The Greens, this is to some degree a hippie party, a party that has let's say the cannabis in its DNA. And of course they want home grow. That is part of what they promised their voters. Socialist Party, well, it says the word itself. They want social clubs. They said this conference, they were so excited about the concept of social clubs. Doesn't mean that they totally understand what it is, but it's a collective, so they push it. And then you have the liberals who are more on the business side and say we need a liberal open market with all kinds of products. And this is something that we haven't mentioned here yet. Edibles, vapes, extracts, dabbing, all forms and devices and ways of also replacing these 400 tons or being part of these 400 tons. So I think it's going to be a mix of intelligent lawmaking where we integrate part of that industry that already exists from the illicit market and a lot of import and some cultivation from the medicinal 3 companies licenses that we have.
Nick, you wanted to add something, I saw?
Yeah, I mean, we are entrepreneurs, right? So we find solutions for difficult tasks, right? So I think that politicians also heavily rely on us and the industry to find a solution for that issue. I agree with you. I think it's a difficult task, but nevertheless, I can imagine that we will have some kind of trade union between these states which already have, or the countries who already legalize cannabis. That will be one solution. And I think also that we need discussions on a European level, right? And that is something Germany needs to do, needs to lead also, right? And I can imagine that also between countries within the EU, we will have some kind of bilateral agreements in order to export cannabis to Germany.
So, last question, and we're running out of time again. So, just provide a date. When will cannabis be legalized for adult use in Germany? Who wants to start?
Okay, I already came out as the great procrastinator and the pourparleur for a slow introduction. And so I have to sort of be in line with that. And I think, I doubt it's going to happen in this legislative period.
Give us a date, Arnold.
26.
26?
26.
Wow. Okay, Finn.
Not before.
I think there is a time frame. In the best case, it could happen end of 2023. In the worst case, I think not later than 2024. So if you ask me like what would be my best guess as of now, I would be still optimistic and say Q4 2023.
That's what we want to hear. Boris.
In that way, I agree with Finn. We're looking at end of 23 because also by that time the Senate in Germany will hopefully be run more by socialist parties than by conservative parties, and we need that shift because till then that won't happen. It's very unlikely. So end of 23 ideally, and if it doesn't happen this legislative period, I'm not even.
End of
I doubt
23.
26 is going to happen.
End of 23?
End of 23.
End of 23 twice and 26 once. Niklas.
I mean, like I said before, during my 5 years in the medical cannabis industry, I learned to be a little bit conservative when it comes to timelines, right? But I think I'm very satisfied actually with the speed of the German government right now. So I'm quite optimistic, and I think Q1, Q2, 2024, legalization in Germany.
The winner gets a beer, I pay. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Big applause for those founders and entrepreneurs and business makers who are brave enough in these kind of times and regarding all these question marks to build the businesses of the future. Thank you.